Hello, welcome along everybody. This is another session in the Qmulus Virtual Sage CRM Summit for 2021. I'm joined by my colleague Jeff Richards. I'm David Beard from the Sage CRM team, both of us based in London. And this session for our partners is all about the architecture of the product. And Jeff, we do this because there's a lot of history that is both interesting to know, but also useful to know, correct?
Well, I think a lot of these sessions that we're doing are playing into each other. So if one of the sessions that for the partner track is to be able to talk about Sage 2021 onwards. If you want to know how we're going forward, you have to understand, one of the things that you have to understand is some of the limitations of the product in terms of its architecture, the fact that it's a product still in transition. It's still got its foot in, if you like, in one architecture, and this is explaining how it is so that you can see how we can change. At the same time, it manages to demonstrate that we are a product that is really quite dynamic in the ability to change very, very rapidly. Shall I go on?
Please.
Okay.
Please do.
Okay. Well, if we start off, but if you think about an existing Sage CRM screen, for example, something like the person summary screen.
Okay.
It's a browser. You're looking at this inside a browser. So all of the interface is HTML based. It's drawn up into the browser as a result of an HTTP request. You're either going to be calling it over HTTP or HTTPS. And when you're calling in to the main user interface, you're calling down to what's called an ISAPI extension. That's an eWare DLL. You'll see that in the URL. And that essentially used to be it. The idea of the eWare DLL is at the heart of CRM. It's changed, and I'll explain how it's changed, but that eWare DLL is written and is still maintained in a language called Delphi. And the request is sent from the browser. It's, as I said, an extension under IIS, the web server. It then has that request. It looks at what is contained within the request. If it's got the credentials, for authentication, it looks at the contextual information contained within the URL, and all that is parsed then by the eWare DLL, interacting with the database to be able to produce the screens. Now, that eWare DLL is the thing that is handling the security and session management. Now, One of the things that's important to understand about Sage CRM is that it separates its rules out from the concept of what's generating the interface, which is HTML, and what is the rule about how it should give the data to you, which is if you like, the security logic, and etc. All of those rules are stored within the database. So the eWare DLL is doing the what should I do, the how should I do it, and the data and the system database provides the metadata to describe what it should do. And that eWare DLL is interacting through the SQL Server database, because all of our integrations are on SQL Server, through Active Data Objects. And ActiveX data objects, and so the database is holding this thing called metadata, which describes what the system should look like, and then the application data, which is basically the business data that people need. I was going to say, being that's built on a web service, it's quite snappy, isn't it? Most of the time, from most applications, most deliveries. Yeah, very, very fast. If you were to look at the core bits of the product, it scales very, very well. We scale out, and you can scale up to architecture where you've got multiple web servers all talking through to the same database. The key thing for Sage CRM's performance is that it is very much database bound. So
Right.
it is most of the system performance is determined by the tuning of the
Right.
database.
But for your average typical sites, of which we have many hundreds, tens of thousands around the world, your
Uh,
average database tune is good to go, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and actually that database for 50% of our initial customers can be I would imagine can be easily handled by a SQL Express
Mm,
database.
mm.
You're looking at something that if you're looking at core behavior for one of our smaller end customers, then you're dealing with something that is very snappy, very efficient in being able to pull back the database.
Okay, so we've talked about the core and the way the core works through the DLL and rendering out of the metadata. What about these other things? There are other services, right, that people often trip over and go, "What are these? Tell us about the services."
They should be tripping over them. They're very useful things. Like we have, in addition to the core behavior, core DLL, we have the email manager, the escalation service, the indexing, and quick find services, and maybe even if you are if you're dealing with one of the integrated products, you'll be even working with an integration service as well. So there's 4 or 5 different services that run on the machine, and they're all you can see the services running within the context of the Windows Management Console. And they are doing different jobs to allow for 24/7 operation when nobody actually has to be logged on into the system. They're just doing their thing.
Right.
Um,
So typical deployments may have some of these running, may have all of them, but not always, right? So it depends
Well,
what you're doing.
if for example, you're not integrating using, if the particular accounting integration that you have doesn't use something
Yeah.
called the GCRM contract,
Yeah.
you won't be running the integration service. But
Okay.
if you are, then you would. And if you're not using the advanced mail manager, you wouldn't have that running. But you'd probably have the indexing server and the key and the quick find working, and you'd probably also have the escalation service running. Typically, you'd have 2 or 3 core things
Yeah.
running
Right. Makes sense.
in
Okay.
addition.
So moving on, or actually moving back in many ways, you talked before about the eWare DLL and what it does. There's also a lot of management going on through the DLL to look after the integration points. Can you tell us more
Well,
about that?
that's right. So we've got some of these older APIs, and so it's the UKI DLL that is responsible for enabling and providing the classic ASP API, and even the .NET API, because they're essentially interacting with the UKI DLL through COM or through a COM bridge. And in the case of the web services, the SOAP-based web services is also using the interacting with the eWare DLL. Um,
So
and yeah,
why do we do this? Why does it matter? What does it give people?
what does it have? Well, it gives people that they're there, if you like, the classic. I want to be able to create an extension on the server type extensions of Sage CRM. So if you're looking to add something into the CRM onto the CRM server as a set of pages, then you need those APIs. And they are the fastest, best way of being able to integrate with CRM. It's not the same if you're wanting to, say, work remotely. You do have the SOAP-based web services which allow for remote development, but increasingly within the cloud environment, you need to be able to well, you can't make any assumptions really about the trusted relationship of where your extension is running. You want to be able to be decoupled from the 2 systems.
I know there's an interesting graphic you've used over time, which I've used as well, about this compare and contrast between all the all the integration methods and the what you can and can't do, and the controls and so forth, right?
That's correct. Yes. So there are different things that different APIs will allow
Yeah.
you to do, and different choices that you would make. Increasingly, it is getting because now we have the the REST API, and this is where moving into where, if you like, the modern API. And increasingly, Sage CRM has had this modern level placed onto it from years back now, actually, where we've added in the capabilities of working with a set of features based on Tomcat and web apps running on top of Tomcat. These are all giving us the ability to extend CRM to be able to add in new behaviors. And when we add in new behaviors, whether it's something like a mail merge or whether we add in something like data import or export, we're using it and driving it through those Tomcat web apps. So it is, if you like, a lot of the behavior does that. The Tomcat-based web apps are fully using the metadata so that the same rules are shared between the eWord DLL and the Tomcat side. So you're never going to get out of sync on things like security, for example.
So it's a hybrid architecture then, isn't it? Because you're using the old core to make sure you are, as you say, referencing security, but you're adding new ways of doing extensions.
Yeah, well, actually, to be absolutely clear, both the old technology and the new technology are going back to the same rules. So the rules are defined in metadata. If they're both following the rules and they're both following the rules in the same way, then they're both matching in their behavior, and that's what happens. And we make use of technologies like Apache Tomcat, like the Spring Framework, like Hibernate, to be able to speed up the development of the new features. And we're using increasingly libraries to be able to change the interface elements that we do, whether it was the calendar and calendar list, but ultimately going back and looking at what metadata is giving us to define the interface. So we're still very much using the concept of metadata does all of the heavy lifting for us.
So Tomcat uses JDBC, right? So what have we done that uses JDBC in the product? What have we built out new that looks like core but is done differently?
Well, of course. So if you're working with a COM based system, you're talking through basically the ADO to the database. You're through to the Windows database drivers. There, if you're wanting to take from a Java-based application through to the database, you're going to be talking through JDBC as well. And just about everything. Oh, I've mentioned database import and export. I've mentioned the mail merge. Is using that. That's all done and driven through their dashboards. Yes, and also even things like the document drop. Anything to do with the library, if you like, is increasingly done through the use of working with that. And of course, all of the integration that is modern using the REST API.
Yeah.
That's all done through the Tomcat environment. So if you imagine a request is coming in and saying, I am using something, I want to use a dashboard gadget, or I want to carry out a database import, or I want to be able to carry out a task using the REST API, then that gets hit onto the web server and redirected from IIS through to the Tomcat web server. So the two web servers are running in parallel, and we're working with the idea of redirection through into the Tomcat environment. We'll know that the person is logged on because you've got shared tokens. You then can go into to the database to do the work that you need to do.
And am I right in assuming that's also helping to balance things out a bit better? So we're sharing out a bit of the load. So something like Exchange integration, which might have more of a hit over time, you can have that off separately?
Oh, well, yes, you can. That's certainly when it comes into. That's a very perceptive question, David. I'm almost surprised at you there. Yes, you can. If you're looking at scaling, you can put different services on different and have different servers running for that. I don't think it makes a big difference in the context of a single server installation.
Okay.
But once you get bigger installs. Yes, it does.
Right,
You
understood.
could say this server is going to be responsible for really handling the exchange synchronization.
Okay, terrific. I'll shut you up now that you hassled me at the same time. So thank you for that little brief tour through the architecture. I hope that's useful for everyone who's listening, either if you're new to understand a little bit more about that, and if you're an existing Sage CRM person to understand the future about what we're doing with the new types of architecture as well. So thank you, Mr. Richards, for showing up, and thank you for listening, everybody.
Thank you very much. Check out the other, there are some other brilliant speakers. Check them out.
All right, bye for now.
Bye-bye.